Hey y'all, hi. So I'm really going for it with the fashion videos lately. I decided to just make some of the fashion videos that have been requested over and over again in the comments over the years. Those of you who watch me a lot know that this started as a beauty channel. This is primarily a beauty channel, but I like talking about fashion too. Overall, I'm just interested in the way that aesthetics impact our lives, and I'm leaning into that today with a video about personal style. I've been thinking about this concept. The thing that people have been requesting is to make a video or make videos about how to find your personal style. And when I really sat myself down to structure a video along these lines, I decided that the most effective way to start for me would be to think about what I wish I'd known back when I was in like my teens and early 20s. And I knew that I was interested in fashion. I knew that I got a lot of pleasure and joy out of clothing, but I just didn't have a pathway of any kind when it came to consciously and actively finding or creating a personal style for myself. There's a lot of trial and error, a lot of casting out blindly, a lot of only finding out that I didn't like something after I had bought it, a lot of wasted stuff, a lot of wasted money. So I was like, what would I say if I could go back in time and talk to my past self? What kind of guidance would I give her to maybe put her on a more direct and a more empowered path towards personal style? So that is how I structured this video. If you like it and if you happen to be new here, I really hope you'll subscribe. And now let's go ahead and get into the meat of the video. So if I could go back 15 or 20 years and talk to my late teens, early 20s self about forging personal style, the first step of 3 steps that I've written, the first step that I would give to her, I think it's probably going to sound kind of boring compared to what other people say about how to find your personal style. Step 1 is to understand your personal constraints when it comes to what you wear, your practical constraints. I think that now that I'm in my late 30s, I've come to understand my practical constraints, those that are personal to me, really well. They're almost like second nature. So when I'm clothes shopping, when I'm considering buying something, and something comes across my radar that doesn't fit my practical constraints, I can identify it immediately, say, oh, that won't work for me because of X reason, and it's off the table immediately. I think that in my late teens, early 20s, I was smart enough to list those constraints without going through all of the trial and error, at least not going through as much of it as I did go through. I just dove in head first without sitting back, taking a moment, and making this list. The impetuousness of youth, perhaps. So when I talk about practical constraints, this is what I'm talking about. I'm going to talk about my own and kind of give you an idea through that. A big one for me that I rarely share on this channel, I think maybe once or twice I've brought it up. I am a sweaty person. I sweat a lot. I can't believe this is what I'm launching the video with, but this is like actually the best example and the real core of the issue. I can't wear tops that show sweat, any color that changes visibly when it gets wet. So if you imagine like a piece of sage green t-shirt fabric and you drop a drop of water on it, you can immediately see that drop of water. It's darkened. It's made a dark spot. But if you have a piece of white t-shirt fabric and you drop a drop of water on it, you can't see it. And I learned this the hard way as a young person. The thing that I learned the hard way was that I should just cross everything that could possibly get me in that situation of having sweat stains show off of my list. It's one of my practical constraints. But instead, as a young person, I'd see other people wearing them and they wouldn't have sweat. So I would just keep buying them, wearing them, and then feeling like I had to keep my arms down all the time or put something over them or change them in the middle of the day. And it took me until my maybe mid to late 20s to just stop buying anything that was maybe going to give me that problem. So a similar constraint could be temperature sensitivity. If you're a person who is always too hot, for example, no matter what, really warm fabrics, for example, this top, an excellent example for today, it's made of merino wool. I know that I run cold, so I tend to err on the side of buying warmer clothing, extra warm clothing, and those things that are kind of in the middle, again, they get scratched off the list right away when I'm thinking about what I might buy. Another constraint is body type. So I'm quite tall, I'm 5'9". There's a whole bunch of lengths of skirts and shorts that just don't work for me because you will literally see my butt. I also have a significant hip dip on the sides of my hips. I don't particularly like things that cling, like column dresses that cling to that part of my body. There's a whole huge group of dress styles and pants styles that are just off the list of things that could contribute to my personal style because of that. preferences that result from your body type, those kinds of things go onto this list. Another huge category of practical concerns, lifestyle concerns. On the one hand, lifestyle concerns have to do with what kinds of activities you're engaged in every day in your life. So if your primary activities require casual clothing, then when you start putting together a personal style, there should be a really heavy emphasis on casual clothing. You should be thinking more about what kind of personal style can emerge through casual clothing than other kinds of clothing. So I think it can be actually really helpful to think about what percentage of your time is spent needing certain kinds of clothing. Other lifestyle adjacent things, a huge one, cleaning ability and willingness when it comes to clothing. How able are you to clean your clothes? How frequently do you clean them? How do you clean them? What are you willing to do? Like, to what lengths are you willing to go to clean your clothing? If all you ever do when it comes to cleaning your clothes is throw all your clothes into the washer and then throw all your clothes into the dryer, all your clothes should be clothes that are resilient in those circumstances, that can make it through the washer and can make it through the dryer. Everything else should be off your list. I remember in my early 20s, probably in the first professional or kind of semi-professional environment that I was in, I bought a bunch of clothes willy-nilly to fit myself into that professional environment without thinking at all about these other constraints, especially not thinking about this constraint of cleaning. Eventually, they all got dirty and had to be taken to the dry cleaner. A bunch of them were dry clean only. I took them to the dry cleaner and it was like $75. And I was just like, I can't be paying $75 every time I need to wash these clothes, like this small wardrobe of professional clothes that I carefully picked because, I mean, to say I was on a budget at that time is like an understatement. It's just, I absolutely could not afford to dry clean my clothes. And yet I had purchased all of these clothes that needed to be dry cleaned. And then there are also big, obvious ones like the climate in which you live. That's especially a big one for shoes. This is something it took me a long time to realize. Shoes can, I think, ruin an outfit. And so if you live somewhere where certain kinds of shoes are absolutely necessary, like if you live in New York City and you walk everywhere, you're like walking all the time and you need really comfortable shoes all the time. If you live somewhere where it's really icy and snowy for a lot of the year and you have to basically wear snow boots most of the time, those kinds of climate constraints need to be the building blocks of your personal style, because if you start with them, you can build a personal style that includes beautiful shoes that fit with your style, that also work with your personal constraints, where everything is integrated and you don't end up ruining your outfits by wearing the practical shoes that you need and having them at complete cross purposes with everything else you're wearing. So that's just an example when it comes to climate. You might live somewhere hot, somewhere buggy, somewhere super sunny where you have to slather yourself with sunscreen all the time. You might need a coat all the time. All of those things go onto this list. And another big one for me, the last one I'll share with you, is comfort. What makes you comfortable and how important it is to be physically comfortable in your clothes. Some people don't mind being kind of bound and trussed up and waistbanded and sucked in. For some people, that's just the experience of wearing clothes. For some of us, I would say me included, clothes like that might seem really great when you're trying them on, especially if they look really great and you get them home and you never wear them because you want to be comfortable as much as you want to look good. So know what is your required level of comfort with your clothing and put that in place as one of your foundation stones of your personal style, and build a personal style that is integrated with that takes that into account, and that will always be serving you looks that allow you to feel physically comfortable. If you start with practical constraints, you can do that. If you have this list written down, if you clarify it really clearly for yourself in your head, you can pull it off effortlessly, and you can do it without wasting a bunch of time and money. And I think that there are other things, there are other practical constraints. Those are just the ones that I thought of off the top of my head when I was making notes for this video. But if I could go back and tell myself to take an organized approach, I would tell her step one is to make a clear list of personal constraints. And then, emboldened by that list, with that list in hand, I would have told her to go and gather inspiration in a concrete, mindful way, to gather inspiration somewhere and to make sure that that gathered inspiration aligned with the personal constraints. As an artistic person, as a person sensitive to aesthetics, and I think this is probably true of a lot of you out there watching me as well, I am always kind of gathering inspiration in my mind. So when I was a young person, I was already always gathering inspiration inspiration, but I was doing it in a haphazard, disorganized way. Again, a little bit of a subconscious way. I would see things, like I would see people wearing things and I would be like, I like that. And I would sort of file that away. Or I would be shopping, like I would be scrolling on a website and looking at the clothes there and thinking maybe that could work for me, and using that to kind of try inspiration, like try visuals or silhouettes on for size based on what was on offer in the shops. But I think by doing that second thing, by kind of letting shopping itself feed me inspiration, I think I was really letting myself be led down a bunch of paths that I might not have otherwise taken in pursuit of personal style if I had taken a more empowered approach. If I had gathered inspiration in a concrete way, in my own personal way, in a place that was separate from shopping. I really like Pinterest. I know that a lot of people also love using that function of Instagram where you can save images. And a lot of people just screenshot stuff and save it in a folder on their computer desktop. But whatever you do, by way of gathering inspiration, make it concrete. I make this suggestion for a couple of reasons. One is that it's much easier when you are saving things concretely to step back and assess them and ask yourself whether they fit your personal constraints. So if you have the list of personal constraints and then you start building this concrete inspo space, like this board, you can compare the two. You can sit down and be like, oh, it looks like I'm saving a bunch of silk dresses or a bunch of silk camis to my board, but I want to be able to put all of my clothes in the dryer. So even though they seem appealing to me, and even though I feel inspired by them, it's not actually practical to want to build my personal style around silk camis or containing silk camis, which is fine. And this is another thing I wish I could have said to my past self. You don't have to incorporate everything that you kind of like. There are so many qualities of outfits and people and garments in fashion that will light you up, that will make you think, oh, there's really something about that. It's so special. So many more will do that than you want or need to include in your personal style. That's what personal style is. It's like a picking and choosing, a culling, a sculpting. And by its nature, that kind of sculpting excludes things. And you end up, I have ended up over the years excluding lots of things that I love for their own sake, that I think are so wonderful, that I love seeing other people wear, and sometimes put them on and I feel great in a specific way in them. And in theory, in another life or in another lifestyle, or in this life, in this lifestyle, if I had just chosen a little bit of a different path for my personal style, I might buy that thing, I might wear that thing. But I ended up trimming it away from the personal style that I sculpted for myself because I was trying to create something that was cohesive and clear and bold and that I felt I could return to over and over again and would work for me with longevity. My personal style. If you're gathering inspiration on something like a Pinterest board, you can throw stuff on there with no compunction. You haven't spent any money. You haven't gotten a bunch of stuff into your house in order to learn the lesson that it doesn't align exactly with what you think you want for yourself. You can see it laid out before you and you can start to ask yourself questions, both about personal constraints and about what feels the most exciting. You can let things sit there over time and sort of marinate, revisit them, and make informed decisions over time about whether you really want those silhouettes or those fabrics or those colors to be part of your personal style. And then the third step in this 3-step process that I wish my past self had undertaken, the third step is to experiment, but to experiment with a pretty clear direction in mind. Now, I did experiment, right? Experiment was all that I did. This, what I'm telling you now, is my retroactive answer to the experimenting as the only guiding principle path that I did take. And when I say that, what I mean is that I would just go out like buying stuff. I would just be going out, trying stuff on, buying stuff without thinking about how it fit together with itself, without thinking about what kind of cohesive vibe I was trying to create. I was hoping to buy my way to a personal style item by item. So I would just buy one thing at a time that appealed to me. But as I said before, lots of things appeal to me. Again, as somebody sensitive to qualities of design, I'm somebody who can find most designed things appealing in one way or another. There are so many things things that have appeal. And at that time, because I wasn't sorting the wheat from the chaff beforehand. I wasn't deciding what I wanted for myself, which particular kind of delight I wanted for myself. I wasn't deciding that beforehand, but just going in and kind of talking myself into trying out anything that remotely delighted me. So a lot of things ended up not working together with each other. A lot of things ended up not working for my personal constraints, my lifestyle. Like I said, they would be too formal for my casual lifestyle. They would need to be dry cleaned when I really couldn't afford dry cleaning. They would show my underarm sweat. They would sit in my closet not being worn because they just weren't quite comfortable enough. Because I was buying things willy-nilly, doing trial and error one garment at a time, I ended up with all of that waste. What I wish I had done was experiment with a clear directive in mind, which is what I do now when I go shopping all of these years later. Periodically, I go through and add to my Pinterest board. I love going through and looking at my Pinterest board and just thinking, oh yeah, I've never really had an all-white outfit, like crisp white pants and a crisp white top. And that is totally something that fits with my personal style. And if I get them in fabrics that are natural fibers, that have longevity, that can be washed at home, and it's white so it doesn't show my underarm sweat, and they're comfortable enough, the garments are loose and comfortable enough that I'll want to wear them over and over again, that'll fit all of my personal constraints. I love looking at my Pinterest board, thinking thoughts like that, and then not obsessively searching, but just keeping an eye out for the kind of garments that might contribute to a look like that. That kind of keeping an eye out with a loose outline of what I am looking for to fit my personal style. That kind of keeping an eye out is what has scored me my most wonderful pieces of clothing, my most worn pieces of clothing. And ultimately, that is how I've built my personal style over the years, especially how I've built it in a way that's sustainable. So that I've ended up with a wardrobe of garments that I wear season after season and that don't get old to me and that don't feel like they need to be replaced either because they've fallen out of favor or because they've fallen apart. I'm also a huge, huge fan of trying things on in the store as much as you can. This is especially true if you're younger and there are things about your personal constraints that you just don't really know yet. Like you don't really know what silhouettes you like the most for your body type. You don't really know what kind of cuts make you feel the most physically comfortable and what your tolerance level is for things like tight waistbands or tight tops. You know, online shopping can be a real con in this way because when you are figuring it out, when you're just figuring out your personal style, and so you are engaged in this kind of trial and error, sometimes not knowing for sure can be the thing that tips the balance and causes you not to return the thing, even when you wouldn't have purchased it in store. So you buy something because you're kind of trying to find out if that silhouette might look good on you or if you might enjoy wearing that color. And then it arrives, it's not quite what you dreamed it would be and doesn't quite fit how you thought, or it looks good on you, but it's not so comfortable that you want to wear it all the time. And you dither and you just can't decide. And then you just keep it because of that little bit of labor involved in sending it back. And then you've spent money you wouldn't have spent and you've acquired an item that you wouldn't have acquired if you tried it on in the store. So I'm a huge fan of in-store try-ons. I would love to go back and tell my past self, just go shopping with the intent not to buy anything. Just try a bunch of stuff on and learn. Learn about what you like. For this same purpose, I'm a huge fan of designer consignment shops, thrift shops, places where there's just like a massive motley array of stuff that you can just try. And especially in the case of thrift shops, it might then not be so much of an investment to actually buy the piece and try integrating it into your wardrobe and see how it works. So experimenting with your lists in hand, your list of personal constraints and your list of inspiration, your curated, preconceived, pre-approved concept of the personal style that you think you might be headed towards, one that works for you both practically and aesthetically. Shopping with those lists in hand is the first part of step 3, the experimenting that I suggest. And then the last part is to do it in a bold way, to go for your inspiration. So you have those lists in hand, and then when you come across the, voluminous white trousers that you have on your Pinterest board, go for it. Don't let the little voice in your head that's like, oh, that's too dramatic for you. What will people think of you if you wear that? Like, don't let that little voice get to you. If what you've ended up saving to your concrete inspo board has a real point of view, a strong point of view, and it feels a little bit aspirational to you, like you'd like to dress like that, but it just feels kind of out of reach for you. As long as what you've saved aligns with your personal constraints, fits with your lifestyle, fits with what you're willing to wash, fits with what you feel comfortable in your body, with your body type and your body issues, sweating and needing to be comfortable. If it fits with all of those things, you can leap the gap. You can just go for it, like be bold and go for your inspiration. That's what it feels like to craft a personal style and then to take that final step of adopting the personal style, bringing it into your home, bringing it onto your body and embodying it. That's what it feels like. It feels a little bit like you get yourself right up to the edge and then you're like, should I step across? Like, can I step across? Can that really be me? What I'm telling you as part of step 3, which is to experiment with maybe the answer being yes to that, especially if you've been thoughtful about what will work for you in real life and what you think you might really want. Would that I had known, would that I had had this video to watch when I was younger. I think it would have saved me a lot of time, a lot of money for sure, and to be totally honest, a lot of awkwardness, a lot of awkward outfits. It's just nobody ever told me that you could go about building a personal style in a thoughtful way, in a systematic way, that you could actually take the bull by the horns and use your brain and your feelings and your sense of shape and color and beauty to actively build a personal style instead of just bumbling along and kind of eventually hoping that you embodied it. Nobody ever told me, and it took me a long time for me to figure that out on my own. Gosh, I hope that this has turned into a video worth publishing. Again, this is just my attempt to answer the call that I've heard from many of you. I think that I could take many different angles when it comes to talking about personal style. So if you'd like to see me take another angle and take another crack at this topic, let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you for being here. Thank you all so much. I really, really appreciate you. And I hope that you're remembering to take extra good care of yourself so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world. I am working a little late today. Sadie really feels like it's playtime right now and not work time. Maybe she feels like it's snuggle time. I think she just feels like it's snuggle time. But Sadie, it's work time.